It started on a cloudy Thursday afternoon. I was supposed to be gone until Sunday, out on a fishing trip with a few old friends from college. But something tugged at me, not quite suspicion, just a pull. Maybe it was the weather, maybe it was a dream I had the night before, or maybe it was something deeper, something my gut had been whispering for weeks but I refused to hear. Whatever it was, I left the cabin without saying a word, got in my truck, and made the quiet drive back home. As I turned into our neighborhood, the sky above hung low, gray and heavy like it knew something I didn't. Our street was unusually quiet. But as I approached the house, a sleek black SUV came speeding past me. I slowed to let it pass, and in that instant I saw a familiar figure in the passenger seat, a quick flash of her profile, a hand reaching up to adjust her hair, her eyes darting toward me in delayed horror. It was Dana. My wife. My heart didn't drop. It froze. She didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just stiffened for a second before disappearing around the corner in that unfamiliar vehicle. I pulled into the driveway with a sick feeling settling in my stomach. Everything around me was silent, the way a house gets when it's holding its breath. I parked, stepped out, and took a deep breath before walking to the front door. Just as I was about to unlock it, the door opened. Dana stood there, holding a towel, her hair damp at the ends like she'd just taken a quick shower. Her eyes were wide, but her mouth smiled, the kind of smile you practice in a mirror before a job interview. She blinked at me, then said, "Babe, you're home early." I asked who had dropped her off. She paused only slightly, not enough for most people to notice, and then said, "Oh, Tasha. We went to that new yoga class I told you about, then grabbed smoothies." She had to rush to pick up her kid. But I knew Tasha's car. A light blue Honda, not a black SUV with tinted windows and rims that looked custom. I knew Tasha's husband, too, laid-back guy, wouldn't be caught dead speeding down a suburban street like he was escaping something. And I knew Dana had never mentioned any new yoga class. Still, I didn't call her out. Not then. I looked her in the eyes and nodded slowly. "Okay." She tilted her head as if expecting a challenge, but I gave her none. Instead, I stepped past her into the house. The smell hit me first, a faint cologne I didn't recognize, mixed with her usual citrusy body wash. The living room looked spotless, cleaner than it usually was in the middle of the day. Pillows fluffed. Candles lit. Music playing softly from the Bluetooth speaker in the corner. Dana had always been neat, but this wasn't her usual straightened up, this was covered up. She followed me in, chatting about how hot the yoga studio was and how she almost fainted from the heat. Her voice sounded rehearsed, like she had gone over this version of events in her head already. I nodded at all the right times, asked nothing more. My mind, however, was racing. Later that evening, our son Miles came home from college. It was a surprise. He hadn't told us he was visiting, just showed up at the front door with a duffel bag and that tired, hungry look that all students seem to wear like a second skin. Dana's face lit up like she hadn't been hiding anything hours earlier. She hugged him tight, too tight, and immediately offered to fire up the grill. "Let's do burgers, your favorite," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. I watched her from the kitchen window as she bustled around the backyard, laying out plates, laughing at something Miles said, flipping patties with the ease of a woman perfectly at peace. But I wasn't fooled. Not anymore. I stood at the sink, rinsing off my coffee mug, trying to piece together how long I had been blind. How many times had I ignored that strange look in her eye when she checked her phone? How often had she vanished to go for a walk right after dinner? How many explanations had I swallowed simply because I didn't want to seem paranoid? After dinner, she cleared the plates, humming to herself as if her day hadn't started with lies. Miles was telling a story about his economics professor, and she was laughing like she had no secrets at all. But I saw her glance at her phone on the counter, screen down, and then at me. She smiled again, too long this time, and asked if I was okay. "I'm just tired," I said, my voice low. And maybe I was. Tired of guessing. Tired of wondering what truth sounded like in a house filled with good intentions and quiet betrayals. That night, I lay awake long after the lights went out. Dana fell asleep quickly, like she always did, one leg thrown over the sheets, arms curled beneath her chin. I watched the ceiling fan spin in slow circles above us. My mind kept replaying the image of her in that SUV. The way she froze. The way she recovered. It wasn't what she said that haunted me. It was how easily she said it. Like lying had become her second language. Like my trust had become something she could bend without breaking. She shifted in her sleep, murmuring something I couldn't make out. I turned my back to her. I knew something had changed. I didn't know yet what it meant or what it would cost. But that day, the day of the black SUV and the practiced lie, was the beginning of something. Not a confrontation. Not yet. Just an unraveling. And even though everything still looked the same, I could feel it. Something cold and unfamiliar had crept into the corners of our home. Something invisible but undeniable. I had seen it in her eyes, and it wasn't going away. The next morning began like any other, or at least that's how it looked from the outside. Dana had made coffee, scrambled eggs, and avocado toast like she always did when Miles was home. He scrolled through his phone, grumbling about gas prices, while she packed his favorite snacks for the road, even though he hadn't decided when he was leaving. I sat at the table, listening to the quiet rhythm of family, but feeling like an outsider to it. Every sound echoed differently now, not louder, but deeper, like it carried secrets I hadn't noticed before. I sipped my coffee and let my mind drift back. Not to yesterday, not to the SUV or the lie, but to the things I had buried for months, maybe longer. I remembered the weekend trip she said she took with her photography club. It was supposed to be 2 nights in Phoenix for an art event. She had sent me pictures of museums, buildings, a few candid sh*ts of food and coffee. But none of the people, none of the group. When I asked who she went with, she only mentioned a woman named Carla, someone I'd never met and strangely never heard of again. Then there was the time she came home late in the middle of the week, past midnight, claiming her client's photo shoot had run long because of bad lighting. She smelled like cinnamon and bourbon, not the usual faint scent of hairspray and lotion. Her heels clicked a little too confidently as she walked through the house, phone clutched tightly in her hand. When I asked how it went, she said, "Exhausting," and went straight to the shower without another word. But it was the little things that kept surfacing in my memory now, like broken glass reflecting pieces of a bigger truth. A few months ago, she started waking up in the middle of the night. First, I thought it was insomnia. I'd roll over, half asleep, and hear the soft padding of her footsteps leaving the bedroom. Sometimes she'd come back with water. Sometimes she wouldn't come back at all until sunrise. One time, I woke up at 4 a.m. to find her asleep on the couch with her laptop open beside her. The screen was still glowing, and there was a tab open to a private email account I didn't recognize. She stirred when I touched her shoulder, blinked up at me, and mumbled something about watching documentaries because she couldn't sleep. She closed the laptop and went back to bed. I never saw that email again. She deleted her Facebook next, said it was too toxic and full of people who don't matter anymore. I believed her. But then, 2 weeks later, she had a new account. Private, no photo, only a few friends. I wasn't one of them. When I asked, she laughed and said it was just for professional contacts. Photography stuff, she added quickly, then kissed my cheek and changed the subject. I didn't press her. I didn't want to look like one of those insecure husbands who spy on their wives. But maybe I should have. There was one morning, and I'll never forget this, when I came downstairs early and found a crumpled paper on the counter. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe it was the way it had been half hidden behind the toaster. It was a note, written in blocky handwriting I didn't recognize. There was a name written at the top, crossed out several times. Underneath it, words like Thursday, noon, and cabin were circled. I stared at it for a long time. When Dana came downstairs and saw it in my hand, she froze. Then she laughed and said, "Oh, that's just an old prop from a photo shoot." I was practicing concepts about obsession. She said it so smoothly, so convincingly, that I nodded and tossed it in the trash. I didn't even keep it. I think about that often, the evidence I threw away with the eggshells and coffee grounds. But the most telling change came with her phone. For 18 years, we had shared everything: grocery lists, Spotify accounts, passwords, phone chargers. We were never the couple who needed boundaries because there was never anything to hide. At least that's what I thought. Until the day I picked up her phone to check the weather, and it asked for a passcode. She changed it, without telling me. When I asked why, she shrugged and said, "Company policy. Client privacy." I nodded. But inside, something turned cold. That was the day I started locking my own phone too, not because I had anything to hide, but because the *Macy of trust had already been severed. Still, I told myself it was work stress. I told myself it was hormonal shifts, early signs of burnout, or maybe just boredom. 18 years is a long time to stay in love the same way. Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. Maybe she felt alone. So I adjusted. I cooked more. I planned weekend hikes, left little notes in her suitcase when she traveled, even bought her the new lens she had wanted, expensive, but she lit up when I handed it to her. I thought maybe that spark would bring us back. And for a few weeks, it seemed like it had. She smiled more. We made love a few times in the quiet mornings like we used to. She told me she was proud of me out of the blue one Sunday afternoon. I held on to that for dear life. But now, in the light of what I saw yesterday, that SUV, her face, the lie that slipped off her tongue, I couldn't pretend anymore. I realized that the woman I had been trying to win back was already gone. Or worse, she was still here, but she was never really mine anymore. I sat at the kitchen table long after Miles left that afternoon, just staring at her coffee mug. Lipstick stain at the rim. Perfectly centered. Like everything else in her life, carefully placed, carefully managed, always presentable. I tried to imagine who he was. The man in the SUV. The one who had gotten used to her voice, her smell, her secrets. I wondered if he knew I existed. If he laughed when she talked about me. If he had ever looked at our family photos and felt the weight of what he was breaking. But mostly, I wondered when it started. Had it been a year? 2? Did she cry the first time she betrayed me, or had it been thrilling? Was I ever truly enough? Or was I just the man she chose to build a life with while her heart remained somewhere else? I didn't know the answers. And maybe I didn't want to. But the questions were there now, heavy and loud, taking up space in every corner of the house. And I knew something was coming, something final. The moment where pretending would no longer be an option. Where the cracks would split wide open. Where I'd have to choose whether to keep living in a house of silence or face the truth, whatever it turned out to be. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of knowing anymore. The unraveling came quietly. No confrontation. No raised voices. No slammed doors. Just a series of events that, one by one, turned out into certainty and certainty into pain. It began with an email I wasn't supposed to see. I work in logistics for a small regional supply company, and every employee has a corporate card tied to their expense account. I rarely used mine outside of trips, and I hadn't logged into the expense portal in months. But that morning, a system notification pinged my inbox, a flagged transaction labeled high-value lodging. I almost deleted it, thinking it was junk. But something made me open it. It showed a hotel charge from 2 days prior. A 5-star place in San Antonio. I stared at the line item, 1 night, deluxe suite, plus room service and a bottle of wine. The name on the booking was Dana Holt. My wife. I refreshed the page 3 times, thinking it might be a mistake. Dana didn't even have my work card. I hadn't taken her on a trip in months, and she certainly hadn't asked for it. So how the hell was her name on the receipt? For a moment, I wondered if someone had stolen my card. Then I remembered something I had done years ago, something she probably didn't even know about. When Miles got his license, I had installed a GPS tracker in the family car, just a precaution, a safety net. I never told Dana. It wasn't about spying. Just something for peace of mind when our son first started driving long distances. That same GPS account still worked. With shaky hands, I logged in. The app loaded slowly as if it already knew what it was about to show me. A red dot marked the path of our car 2 nights ago, Austin to San Antonio. It parked at 6:42 p.m. at the very same hotel from the invoice. Stayed until 10:14 the next morning. Then returned to our street by noon. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I just grabbed my keys. The drive to San Antonio felt like watching the end of a movie I'd been trying to deny was real. Every mile I passed felt like shedding a layer of denial. By the time I reached the city limits, my chest was tight with something that wasn't quite anger, it was betrayal, slow burning and bitter, wrapping around every breath. I didn't go inside the hotel. I parked across the street and waited. I didn't even know if she was still there. But some part of me hoped she was, not because I wanted to see her, but because I needed to see the truth. And then they walked out. It wasn't a scene from a drama. It wasn't dramatic at all. It was mundane, 2 people leaving a hotel together like they had done it 1,000 times. Dana wore a short beige coat I hadn't seen before and held a bottle of wine wrapped in tissue paper. The man beside her had gray at the temples, wore a dark blazer over jeans, and carried himself like someone comfortable in stolen moments. I recognized him. Not immediately. But then it clicked. His name was Andrew. Andy, she used to call him. He had worked with Dana years ago when she was just starting out as a freelance photographer. I remembered the name because she used to mention him often, funny stories about jobs gone wrong, about how he helped her figure out lighting issues, how they used to joke about opening a studio together. She hadn't mentioned him in years. I thought he had moved to California. Clearly, he hadn't. I watched as she leaned into him slightly, laughed at something he said, then reached up and touched his chest. The kind of touch that doesn't belong to a friend. The kind of touch you give someone who knows your secrets and your skin. I didn't confront them. I just drove back home. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark living room with nothing but the refrigerator hum for company. At 3 a.m. she came downstairs for water and found me sitting there. She jumped, clearly not expecting me. Asked why I was awake. I told her I couldn't sleep. She said nothing more, just went back upstairs. The next morning I laid the receipt on the counter. Alongside it I printed the GPS map. I said nothing. Just left it there, under a mug. When she came down I watched her eyes lock onto the paper. She stood frozen, her body stiff, her face unreadable. Then, without even looking at me, she said, "This isn't what you think." That sentence. That cowardly sentence. Not "I'm sorry." Not "let me explain." Just the tired cliché of people who know they've been caught but haven't yet figured out how to make themselves the victim. I asked nothing. I simply stood, picked up my jacket, and left the house. When I returned hours later, the papers were gone. She had cleaned the counter. Made herself tea. The wine bottle from San Antonio was on the table, opened. She was on her laptop scrolling like it was just another day. But everything had changed. She finally admitted a few things. That yes, it was Andy. That they reconnected a year ago by accident. That he had gone through a divorce and reached out to her just to talk. That it wasn't physical at first. That they had only been together a few times. That she had been confused. That she still loved me. I listened. Not because I cared what she had to say, but because I wanted to hear the lies with open eyes. When I asked why she had used my work card, she said it was a mistake, that she grabbed the wrong card when filling up gas before the trip, that she hadn't realized it. But the card wasn't in her wallet. It was in my drawer. The next day, I sat down with Miles. I didn't tell him everything. Just that things between us were broken and I wasn't sure we could fix them. He listened, nodding slowly, then asked, "What did you do?" That's when it hit me harder than anything Dana had done. My son thought I was the one who had failed. In his eyes, she was still the one cooking burgers, laughing in the yard, asking about his grades. I was the one who had changed. I tried to explain that not everything was as it seemed. But he wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. Later that night, Dana came into the room and said she was going to stay with her sister for a few days. I nodded. She didn't pack much, just a duffel, her laptop, and that beige coat. When she left, she didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She didn't say goodbye. She just walked out. And I sat there, realizing I wasn't angry. I was empty. A kind of quiet nothingness that comes after the storm when there's no house left to save. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. 3 days passed before she came back. Not with tears or apologies, just a quiet return, like someone slipping back into a house they never really left. The duffel bag she had packed barely looked touched. She walked in with her phone in one hand, the keys in the other, and dropped both on the hallway table without a word. "I need to get a few things," she said flatly, as if I were a doorman, not the man she'd spent almost 2 decades building a life with. I watched her walk from room to room, methodical and calm. Her hands touched bookshelves, opened drawers, moved through closets like she was taking inventory. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Everything important had already been shattered. She packed her photography equipment first. The things she used to say made her feel alive. Lenses, light meters, old notebooks with storyboards she'd once drawn while curled up next to me in bed. She didn't glance at me once. Her expression stayed frozen, practiced, distant. When she came back downstairs, she paused by the dining table. The same table where we celebrated anniversaries, wrapped Christmas presents, listened to Miles tell stories about school dances and late-night pizza runs. She reached out and touched one of the wooden corners, her fingers barely grazing the surface. For a second, I thought I saw something flicker in her, maybe regret, maybe fatigue. Then she looked at me. "There's no point pretending we can fix this," she said. "It's been broken for a long time. You just didn't want to see it." I didn't argue. I didn't mention the years I tried to bridge the growing silence between us, the little gestures she shrugged off, the way I stayed even after I knew her heart had wandered somewhere else. I simply nodded. "I'll stay with my sister for now," she added. "Maybe longer. You should probably talk to a lawyer." The sentence didn't sting. It landed with a dull thud, like a door closing behind you on a house you once loved but could no longer live in. I told her she could keep the house. I meant it. I didn't want it anymore. The walls were too full of ghosts, the floors too heavy with what-ifs. I had built a workshop by the lake 3 years earlier, a hobby, a refuge. It had no real plumbing and barely enough insulation, but it felt more like home than the hollow shell this place had become. As she loaded the last of her things into her car, Miles pulled into the driveway. He had been staying with friends, giving us space, though I suspected he just didn't want to be in the middle of what he still thought was my fault. He got out, confused, eyes darting between us. "You're leaving?" he asked her. She sighed and nodded. "Just for a while?" Then he turned to me. "Did you even try?" The question hit harder than I expected. Not because of what he said, but because he believed it. My son thought I had given up too early, that I had let his mother walk away without a fight, that I had stopped loving her or maybe never loved her enough. I didn't correct him. I just said it's more complicated than that. He didn't reply, just walked past me into the house, shaking his head. Later that night, I moved into the workshop. I didn't take much: a mattress, a small heater, my tools, and a few framed photos of Miles when he was a boy. The space was barely 300 square feet, but it was mine. It smelled of pine and sawdust, and the wind off the lake made the windows creak, but it was peaceful. Honest. There were no lies in that space. No glances that meant more than they claimed. No tension disguised as silence. In the mornings, I woke early, made coffee over a single burner stove, and stood by the door watching the sun break across the water. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The pain was there, yes, but it was clean now. Like a wound that had been properly lanced. I spent my days repairing old radios, sanding planks, building benches I had no use for. Sometimes I talked out loud to no one. Just to hear a voice. One night, maybe a week after the separation, Miles came to the workshop. He stood outside for a long time before knocking. When I opened the door, he looked hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was trespassing on something fragile. "Can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside. He walked around slowly, taking it all in, the scattered tools, the dusty shelves, the coffee mug half full on the workbench. Then he turned to me. "Why didn't you fight for her?" he asked. It wasn't anger in his voice anymore. It was confusion. Sadness. I answered honestly. Because she wasn't mine to fight for anymore. He sat down on the bench I had built the day before and looked at the floor for a long time. Then he whispered, "She said you shut down years ago. That you stopped seeing her." That made me pause. Had I? Had I really missed the signs? Or had I just held on to hope longer than I should have? I didn't know how to answer him. So I said nothing. He left soon after, saying he needed time to think. I told him the door was always open. I meant it. Days turned into weeks. I got used to the cold, the quiet, the slow rhythm of starting over. I read books by lantern light and made dinners out of canned soup and toasted bread. I listened to music on old vinyl, let the needle crackle its way through memories I couldn't name. Sometimes I thought about her, Dana, and wondered if she was happy now. If Andy had filled the space I couldn't. If she ever thought about the look on my face when I saw her outside that hotel. But most days I didn't wonder at all. There was something sacred about solitude, about claiming your own silence and making peace with it. The world had narrowed down to the smell of wood shavings, the sound of waves lapping against the dock, the occasional text from Miles, usually brief, always polite. Then one evening a storm came. Not a metaphorical one, a real one. Thunder, lightning, sheets of rain that turned the lake wild and restless. I sat by the window, watching nature tear at itself, and felt something stir inside me. Not grief. Not longing. Release. I didn't know what the next chapter would look like. I just knew this one, this broken home, this shattered version of us, was over. And I was still standing. It was early spring when Miles came back to the workshop. The air was warming, but the lake still held that sharp bite in the mornings. I had just finished varnishing a canoe I'd been working on for weeks, not because anyone had ordered it, but because the repetition kept my hands from going idle, and idleness still felt like a threat. I wasn't expecting anyone. So when I heard his voice outside calling, "Dad," I nearly dropped the brush. He stood at the doorway, taller somehow, though it had only been a couple of months. His face was pale, lips tight, eyes tired in a way that didn't come from lack of sleep. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, looked around, and then just said, "We need to talk." I nodded and motioned to the wooden bench by the work table. He didn't sit. He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his jacket, held it in his hand like it was burning. "I was using Mom's old laptop," he said. "Looking for a resume file. Something I needed for an application. I thought she'd saved it there." He handed me the paper. I unfolded it slowly. It was printed text, an email from a Yahoo account to a name I didn't recognize. The date read June 3, 2007. I scanned the words and every line drove the breath out of my chest. "I pretend to love Kevin, but you are my air. You are the space I escape to. You are my truth, even if I can't have you every day. When I look at him across the dinner table, I rehearse my smile. He talks about grocery lists and mortgage payments. I think about your hands, your voice. Someday, when the time is right, I'll stop pretending. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I read it again. And again. Then I looked up at Miles, who was staring at the ground like it hurt to look at me. There's more, he said. He had printed them all. Dozens of them. Messages spanning years. From 2006 through 2019. Some short, barely a sentence. Others pages long, poetic, raw, in asterisk mate. References to meetups. Nicknames. Photographs exchanged. References to me. Us. Our house, our vacations, even Miles's childhood milestones. She had never stopped talking to him. Andy wasn't just a recent reconnection. He had always been there. On the edges of our life. A shadow in every chapter of our marriage. She had woven him into the fabric of our story like a hidden thread visible only if you turned it inside out. She used to forward him our family pictures, Miles said quietly. Christmas mornings. Your birthday. My graduation photos. She wrote things like, he still doesn't know. But you can see it, right? The distance in his eyes? I sat down hard on the edge of the table, feeling something split open inside me, not just betrayal, but the realization that the life I thought I had was never real to her. I had built a home with a woman who saw me as a placeholder. I had loved someone who considered me a performance. She never left him, I whispered. Not even once. Miles didn't argue. He just nodded, his jaw clenched, shame in his eyes, not shame for what she did, but for having taken her side for so long. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't know. I thought she just made a mistake. That maybe you had pulled away. I looked at him, really looked. This wasn't the boy who had accused me of not fighting for her. This was a man carrying the weight of his own shattered illusion. You weren't supposed to know, I said gently. You were supposed to believe in her. That's what parents are for. But it wasn't real, he replied. None of it. Some of it was. Your childhood. The way she looked at you. That was real. She might have lied to me, but I don't think she ever lied about loving you. He swallowed hard, sat down beside me. For a while, we didn't say anything. Just let the silence wrap around us like a blanket full of thorns. Then, slowly, he said, I want to do something different. I turned to him. I don't want to go back to school. Not now. I want to do something that matters. He pulled out a sketch pad from his bag, designs for watercrafts, eco-projects, ideas I'd seen him doodle since he was 12. His childhood dream, long buried under pressure and plans. I want to build something real, he said. Not paper. Not theory. Something that floats. Something that moves people. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something warm in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not healing. But purpose. Then let's build it, I said. We started the next day. We cleared out the back half of the workshop. Turned old canoes into prototypes. Used scrap metal for parts. Bought biodegradable resins and solar kits from clearance websites. The first few months were chaotic, full of trial and error, moments of joy followed by days of frustration. But we kept at it. Word spread. People started coming, not just to buy things, but to learn. To collaborate. Retired engineers, young environmental students, even fishermen who wanted to retrofit their boats with cleaner systems. We called it the Wake Project. Because every boat leaves a trail. And so do people. By the end of the year, we had a grant from the city. We had a small team. We had orders. We even had a website. Miles moved into the apartment above the workshop. We ate dinners on the dock, played chess on rainy days, and rebuilt something, not just a business, but a life. One rooted in honesty. In movement. In forward motion. Dana called once. Left a voicemail. She said she hoped we were well. That she was teaching again. That she understood if we didn't want to talk. I didn't respond. Neither did Miles. Sometimes at night, I wonder if she ever looks at our website. If she sees the news coverage. The photo of us standing beside the first solar-powered boat we sent out onto the water, both of us smiling, really smiling. If she does, I hope she understands. What she destroyed became our foundation. The seasons changed, and with them, so did we. Miles and I no longer spoke about the past. Not because it didn't matter, but because we had finally stopped living in it. The workshop grew busier, and our ideas turned into tangible change. We partnered with city programs, offering internships to students, working with marinas to replace outdated fuel systems, and even began teaching at a local community center. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of my days was meaningful. We turned an unused warehouse on the waterfront into a functional lab, solar-powered tools, reclaimed wood everywhere, even rainwater collectors. People called it innovative, but to us, it was just honest work. I watched Miles become something more than I ever imagined, not just a builder, but a teacher, a leader, a visionary. We were a family again. A different kind of family. And that was enough. I often thought about the man I used to be, the one who kept trying to hold together something long broken. I didn't pity him. I honored him. Because without him, I wouldn't be here. And without the wreckage, we never would have found this path. 5 years later, we opened our biggest project yet, a sustainable shipbuilding center on the lakefront backed by 3 regional governments. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I gave a short speech. When I looked into the crowd, I saw familiar faces, students, friends, even reporters. One of them was Haley, a water systems expert who had helped us on a grant application a year earlier. She approached me afterward, smiling with quiet confidence. We talked, then talked again the next day. And the next week. A year later, we were engaged. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. One afternoon, Miles told me Dana had moved back. Andy had left her. She was teaching at a charter school nearby. I paused for a moment, then asked him, "You know where your home is, right?" He didn't even hesitate. "I'm already here." And with that I knew what I had lost was never mine to begin with. But what we had built, this life, this purpose, this peace, it was